Hello, welcome back. Today we're working on a ball watch, which is known for accuracy, and yep, you guessed it, this one's not. This watch comes from my friend Steve, who's actually given me two watches from my own collection that are extremely dear to me. This is actually his father's watch, and when he told me it wasn't exactly keeping time, of course I told him I'd be more than glad to help with my non-professional skills over here. So I guess first stop is actually getting this open. And you know what? This might actually be harder than servicing the watch itself. So what you're looking at me here trying to do is my best not to scratch the case open. And really, sometimes you just need a tool that looks like this in order to open it, which gives 10 times as much leverage by hand. All right, so take two over here. A week later, with the back open, what an absolutely gorgeous case back and movement. I could tell, I don't think that anyone's been in here before. The screws are extremely tight, and there's no case back marks. Now, interestingly enough, since this is for Steve's dad, and I'm sure he's going to be interested in watching and kind of learning about his watch over here, even though the Ball Watch Company is known for reliable, standardized timekeeping, the movement inside this watch is actually representative of the same kind of movement you'd commonly find in a ton of watches back in the era. And Ball used this ETA 2824-2 movement, and it's basically a slightly modified and enhanced version. I think they call it something else, their own caliber. But in reality, this movement is pretty close to what you'd find in like a Breitling, a Longines. Some Tissot's even use this type of movement. I know Hamilton, Certina, Victorinox, I think even Tudor used a type of movement like this to create their own caliber. And if you ever heard of the Tag Heuer Calibri 5 or Caliber 5, right? Whatever you'd like to call it. That's just a variation of the 2824, which is COSC certified. And there was a patent for this movement for quite some time. I don't know when that ended, but the Sellita SW200 movement, which replaced it, and I think was in that's in a wide range of watches in this day and age. Christopher Ward, I think, uses a Sellita SW200. Bunch of luxury watches, even the Chanel J1, I think, before they switched to their in-house movement. The SW200 actually is a direct clone to this that offers a very similar performance, reliability, and I think all they did was they improved winding the watch. So that means that this movement is actually a really good way to practice for the future when you're getting into servicing a caliber that could be in a wide range of watches in the industry, if that's your thing. For me, I'm just trying to help Steve out, and Steve's dad, obviously. But I obviously do take it as a way to work on a really neat movement that is in a huge range of watches that come in the industry in this day. So if you've seen the channel before, you'll probably notice this is probably the newest watch I'm working on, which is funny. I think it does highlight how much I really like working on old junk. But even if you watch the Rado that was my other friend John's watch a couple videos back, it's very similar to this movement as well. The 2824, it's been around since I think 1971, 1970s for sure. The Dash 2 version I think came out in the 80s, but as you can tell, in the 90s it was quite popular. And I think with the patent expired, the Sellita SW200 is just widely more available, and it's probably a little bit cheaper now to source for watch companies. All right, so first thing we're doing over here is we're just going into making sure that the rotor spins. I know I took apart the whole top, basically, of this watch while I was talking a little bit about the history. But I think everybody that watches the channel can kind of follow along with the parts. And if you're a longtime fan of the channel, you'll notice I'm not really good at explaining individual parts by itself. Anywho, I mislabel stuff all the time. That right there was the balance. That for sure is known. And what we're doing over here is we're taking off the automatic winding bridge. And it's always funny to me. I mean, right under this whole section that we're going to take apart, it's just so cool to know that the watch completely works really without this part. I think it's fascinating. I mean, there's, you know, a manual watch basically is what you would see right now without this part, with this winding bridge removed. And if you could look really closely at the bottom right hand of the screen, you'll notice that there's a little bit of marking of old oil on the automatic winding bridge. So we'll take care of that. So now we're removing the crown wheel and ratchet wheel. And you can tell how tight this is. I mean, it's just the screws on this thing were incredibly tight. Of course, I'm doing this video weeks after actually servicing the watch. I serviced this watch, oh boy, months ago at this point, and we're just getting around to put the video up for it. But I still remember how incredibly fresh the screws were and incredibly tight everything was. All right, so this is interesting. This is the spring and click spring that goes against the ratchet wheel. I love the way on this movement how it slides back and forth. I don't like the fact that I feel like the little spring is going to always fly away on this particular one. Sometimes on movements, the click spring and click are held down with a screw, and on this particular movement it's not, so it kind of floats underneath the ratchet wheel. So you're going to want to pay attention when you're taking that part out. All right, and this right here, this fancy little piece, this is actually the thing that's going to stop the watch when you pull the crown out. This is the hacking lever. It's very delicate. It also has to be in a very particular position when you put the watch back together, and I think I'll show that to you on the reassembly. Right here, it couldn't be easier with one bridge for all these train of wheels over here. On reassembly, of course, it always helps when that's broken apart a little bit, you know, to get the escape wheel and all those wheels down at the same time. You're definitely gonna have to put down 4 pivots at the same time on reassembly. All right, and we're pretty much towards the tail end of the disassembly here. We're just going to take out the pallet fork and the pallet fork bridge. And, you know, there's not really anything wrong. You know, it wasn't keeping time simply because of age, in my opinion. You take a look at the oil, okay? And it's leaving pretty good marks. But when you kind of scroll in a little bit more on this, you'll notice here I am kind of taking some pegwood, and you could see how old the oil is over here. Very old. Okay, the way that it's marking like that, to me it's just past its age, and I think that's why this is not keeping time. So with all parts pretty much looking straight over here, you know, the movement clearly was never taken apart since it was brand new. We're gonna do a nice hand cleaning on all the parts, and just like that, it's back to reassembly right after a hand cleaning as well as an ultrasonic cleaning. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to put the balance back first on this movement, and we're going to take care of the cap jewels first. And there's a good reason for doing this. I want to see that the balance actually spins a good amount of amplitude and time before the entire reassembly process, just to make sure that this is clean. Again, you know, my standards are a little bit higher when I'm working on somebody else's watch and when it's not mine, to be honest with you. You know, if it's just my eBay usual junk piece, and I know it's just for my own collection, you know, some of the things that I probably should be doing are a little bit rushed over, especially since I only do this on the weekend and as a hobby, you know, and just for myself. But the standards kind of go up when it's not yours, which has been, ironically, the majority of the projects that I've been working on as of late. And it's kind of good, you know, it forces me to be better just in practice overall. But really, we're trying to get it 100% correct for Steve's pops over here. I tried to show this on camera as best as I can. This is the upper cap jewel, and I'm actually playing around with different tweezers to hold down the cap jewel and what I think is appropriate. And I've kind of sorted out that this might be the one. Okay, these nice little bent 90-degreers or you know, those types of excuse me, tweezers, I think really do work out well for holding down the cap jewel and making sure that it doesn't float away. Here's the 90-degree, and look at that, all nice and ready to go back in. And you can just place it right where you want it to. I mean, it's a pretty easy process with these 90-degree tweezers. I don't know what the number is on the back. Maybe I'll try to find that and leave it in the comment section. All right, but talking about comments, you know, feel free to tell me if I'm doing anything incorrect or, you know, what I could do better. Just tell me you like the content would be nice. It does take a long time to put together. Giving a like never hurts. Subscribing if you want to see more never hurts. And we're going to do the same process to the top, to the bottom over here. So you can see how I very loosely pry open the gate over there. You don't want this to get out of hand and for the gate to come off. That's a whole different thing, which I've done before. Just not a whole lot of fun on a Saturday afternoon, you know. All right, and once again, we got that out of one dip. And with the 90-degree angles, holding down the cap jewel. The other part on there, this is very tricky work for someone starting out, but you know what? The amount of confidence I have doing this particular part that I used to hate is really astonishing. Yeah, I used to hate doing this part, okay? And that's actually one of the most rewarding parts, I guess you could say. You know, it's a very tiny, tiny part. The gate, the cap jewel itself, the two parts of the cap jewel itself, really easy to float away. Of course, when that all comes back together, it's a huge win. I don't really know what my my least favorite part of assembling and disassembling is now. I think it's all fun. I think the mainspring, you know, taking the mainspring out the barrel and putting it back in and reassembling the arbor is not a whole fun. I usually do that off camera, by the way, just because I like to totally clean the desk and make sure all parts are away, just to ensure that nothing's going to pop and, you know, me search for 1,000 parts at the same time if the mainspring jumps. But here I am, you know, testing to make sure that the balance does have a good amount of time that swings back and forth. Over 30 seconds is really what you should do. At least 30 seconds back and forth. All right, and the tiniest drop of oil. Again, really high standards over here. High standards for me, that is, you know, as high standards as it could come, coming from my bench. We're gonna throw the barrel back in. And the rest of the train of wheels. And pretty easy stuff over here so far. I'd like to say out of a lot of different gear trains that, you know, I've worked on, it's a pretty easy train, excuse me, to sit flat and to get everything lined up. Sometimes the escape wheel kind of goes out of sorts and, you know, doesn't want to collaborate with the other wheels over there. And sometimes if the top bridge is like a pizza shape or a wedge, it's actually hard to get all the pivots in, but this one kind of lays flat. And you can tell I used the tap method, and it worked out pretty well for me. First go over there, and it pretty much laid all the train wheels pretty straight over here. So we're just going to inspect it. Just going to make sure that everything is seated. And it is. Just going to tack this down over here and make sure that we don't damage any of these screws that were perfect to begin with. Now we're putting on the barrel, although I think I spotted something over here. I want to make sure that, yes, you gotta make sure, I almost forgot, you have to make sure this little hacking lever is in over here. All right, that's what I almost forgot. And that would have really grinded my gears because I would have had to take everything apart again. So, you know what, that's how it is sometimes when you're reassembling things. A lot of these movements are, again, like the first time that I'm working on a particular movement. It's not like I'm a pro. I do think what helps, by the way, is researching the movement beforehand and seeing even if there's like YouTube content from somebody else taking apart and reassembling the same exact movement. You'll get a feel of what you have to pay attention to and what you have to really be careful of. All right, so the train of wheels, I don't know if you saw that, but the little lashback on the escaping wheel, that's like exactly what I was looking for. So this looks like it's going together beautifully. And from the dial side, I don't know if you could see it, but I showed it very quickly. Maybe you have to go rewind 10 seconds or so, but you want to make sure that that hack is moving, okay? Very important, otherwise there's no sense in continuing. You have to disassemble the bridge on that side and make sure that that is in the right place. Okay, so very carefully we're putting the click and click spring back on. A little bit of oil over here. And I see some people using grease because it's metal on metal for the ratchet wheel over here. I always, for some reason, put oil. I don't know what the right take is. Maybe somebody could tell me. All right, but that was a HP 1300 right over there. Here we're putting the barrel all back together. Okay, and a nice little final test over there, making sure that all the train gears are working. And it's time for reassembly of a little bit of the dial side now. Again, see how I'm sliding that hack back and forth? You're going to want to make sure that that is seating right in between that winding gear. And now we're putting the yoke back in. And there was a lot of parts to this side, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot going on in this section over here, so you know, you just have to play around and make sure that everything is seated correctly. A little splash oil over here. And here's the yoke going back in. Yep. And they all have to sit on certain parts. This yoke has to go and slide, and again, the hacking has to slide from the other side at the same time. And here is the yoke spring, which is very funny on this movement. I do prefer it though, because it's like one piece and something you can't lose. And then you just have to make sure that this is all sat down flat. There's two sides that have to be sorted out over here. You saw me adjust that other side, and this one has to also be adjusted as well. Okay, now we're going to oil the train gears from this side. It is a mixture of HP 1300 and 9010. Okay, 1300 goes on the barrel, the fourth wheel. 9010 would go on like the escapement, center seconds. And now we're just going to put the smallest bit of 9415, I believe it is, on the pallet fork. And there on the bottom of the screen, you can see it says 2824 ETA, right? So even though the rotor is labeled as ball, you can always tell what manufacturer made the movement. A little stamp on it somewhere. And we're nicely putting in the pallet fork. Moment of truth. It's just not see it correctly. And there we go. Okay, and the balance is not even tacked down yet, so that's always really nice to see. You had to hold your breath there for a second. It took me a while to get the balance back in, but there you go. Okay, now we're giving a bigger wind to it. I always like to start off with not such a big wind. The balance should move ideally, you know, back and forth with a very small amount of wind. To me, it's like my way of making sure that if I did have to disassemble it again, you know, we're not taking out all the wind that we can. Look at this time graph we're reading though. Woo! Smoking. right? Just reassembled. And pretty good amplitude, 230, right? Maybe it's gonna get 10 or 20 degrees higher upon final assembly. And for once, it's keeping time, you know, back again, just like it should. All right, so keeping this video a little bit shorter, I think I took out reassembling the barrel. I also did not show you guys about the automatic rotor on the back over here and that whole bridge. I had done that part and I just forgot to put the footage back in, to be honest with you. But the reversing wheels, very important to clean the reversing wheels. Those get really dirty and it is going to prevent the effectiveness of the swing of the rotor. So you can't just take that off and as a unit and put it back. You really have to disassemble everything and put it back together. I take my time when I do that just because some reversing wheels are not the same. And I want to make sure that, you know, reversing wheel A goes into reversing wheel A's spot and B goes back into B's spot, etc. Learned my lesson a long time ago putting reversing wheels in the reverse way, and it just did not go too well for me. And we're getting pretty much down to the wire over here. I mean, it's just, it's all coming along and it's all looking great. Again, it was a pretty clean movement, just old oil, so it's not like there was major problems like we've seen before where we had to break out the staking kit or anything like that. This is all kind of just old oil that just needed to be cleaned and serviced, which I think Steve told me that he had given this watch to his dad a very long time ago. And it's a daily wear. Okay, so we're putting the date disc back together over here. Really keen idea would have been to use non-metallic tweezers on this part specifically. You definitely don't want to scratch the date dial. I'm sorry, the date disc. So always plastic where you can. The problem with the plastic ones, of course, it's very hard to get actual good grip. I know they make wood ones as well. Maybe that'd be a good idea for me to pick up. And one thing I always half forget is that that little dial washer. I always forget that thing. Then I have to do it all over again. So don't forget the dial washer, guys. Okay, or the spacer. There's a little spacer on this movement before. It's like a spacer ring that you put around the entire movement. You're not going to want to forget that as well. And I really like the movement spacer on the bottom over here. That's a chunky boy. That's a big one. And this dial is just too beautiful not to take care of. So we're making sure that there's no dust anywhere on this thing. Little fibers have to go away. It is a beautiful, I guess you call this like lacquered dial. It really does look like, it reminds me of like the pocket watch type dials back in the day. And maybe that's why Ball did this, because, you know, there was a big railroad thing back then. But it's just so clean. All right, and these are the plastic tweezers I was talking about. Use push-on hand tools as well. And you're going to want to make sure that it's exactly at 12 o'clock when you put the hands on. It does not matter when you set the hour hand a little bit farther ahead and then set the minute hand, but you're going to want to make sure that when you're setting the hour hand, you're at 12 o'clock. I don't think the video shows it, but that is very, very important. Okay, so somewhere over here I notice But there's even more dust I gotta take care of, so I'm just doing that very quickly. I love the way the second hands is over here. The little emblem, so sick. All right, and you might think to yourself, oh, why is it not working? It's because we have the hack on this movement, so nothing to be worried about. See? Boom. There you go. And I don't know if you guys saw the date changeover over there. I do believe this has a quick set date where you just like push in a little bit and it flips to the next day. I think that's the case. And talking about cases, here's the actual case. And I did clean this up just a little bit. The back of the case, the bracelet, only because it was a daily weared watch, and you know, I wanted to make sure that I was giving it back in as best shape as I could. I didn't take any marks out from it. You know, I think someone that's had a long journey with a watch, that's still their owner, deserves to continue making marks, and maybe doesn't want to get rid of the original marks that were made. So all we did was we ultrasonicked the case and the bracelet. Okay, so the Chunky Boy spacer gets held down by 2 other screws. Okay, and at this point it's a manual wound watch. Okay, so we're gonna put the automatic bridge back in. I had taken it off and put it back in just to kind of make sure that everything was going back in the case over here. That gets tacked down with 2 screws. And here is the bridge. I'm using brass tweezers on the bridge over here. That should help prevent a little bit of the scratches. I think it's too sloppy to use the plastic tweezers on this part. And the biggest thing is you just want to make sure that's moving nice and smooth before you close it up. And here is a very poor angle, but the best I could do of me fitting this all back together. This is just a press, kind of like a crystal press. And you're gonna wanna look for that sound right there where it's nice and makes you worry that the glass shattered for a hot second. But as long as you have one of those black dies on the bottom and the top, and the bottom one is pressing just across the edge of the case, I think you're in fine sorts. Okay, so even despite the ultrasonic cleaning, you could tell how much that this was loved, because it still looks like it's got a lot of wear on it, and it does. But it's way better, trust me, it's way better than when we got it. So just fitting the spring bars back in, and we should be good to go. And again, guys, if you really liked what you saw today, please think about subscribing. I really appreciate it. We got this whole ball back together, and now it is an accurate timekeeper. And it's got a really reliable movement, and we're all set to give it back to Steve's dad. So I really appreciate you guys coming, and we'll see you again for the next one. Thanks again.